No. All right, evolution, biodiversity, that's what we're talking about. So you have this written in your note packet. Remember from Unit 1 or Chapter 1, we talked about ecosystem diversity. That means how many different ecosystems there are in an area. Species, how many different species there are. Genetic, how many different genes. Okay. So what I need you to write down is that we measure biodiversity in terms of species richness and evenness. You saw that in the warm-up. You saw that yesterday when we calculated species richness and evenness. So richness is the number of species in a given area. The number of species, and then evenness, this is kind of like a complicated definition. If you just want to write, I mean, you can write that definition if you want. That's like the technical book definition. I wrote here how equal are the populations to each other, or how equal are the populations. That's just another way to put it. So if that makes more sense to you, go ahead and write that. So we looked at this in your multiple choice, this picture here, and we said that it has the same richness because each one has 4 different types of trees or shrubs, but that this one is more even because it has a more equal percentage of each of the species. So the Shannon Diversity Index, you guys used that to calculate yesterday. What I need you to write is what's underlined. So a larger value, we call it H, but a larger value means a greater biodiversity. So the closer the value is, usually this is on a scale of 1 to 4. Like I said, there are a lot of different diversity indices that you can use to calculate. Generally, in every single one of them, the higher the number, the more diverse it is. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you how to calculate biodiversity. You do not need to write this equation down. You do not need to memorize it. You do not need to learn it. I'm going to show it to you just so you have an idea. But scientists always use a calculator that'll do it for them. You don't have a calculator on the AP exam, so they're not going to ever give you anything that you need to calculate with this. So what this is saying is we have to sum up, okay, we have the proportion of the species here. This is the proportion, natural log, proportion. Okay, so I'll show you how to do this. We'll get your calculator out in a second. Cover these up so you can't see them. All right. So it says, imagine there are 100 organisms in an area. You have this example on your sheet. 50 of one species, 30 of another, 10 of another, 9 of another, and 1 of another. Calculate the diversity. So what I need you to do is first copy down the abundance on your sheet. So the abundance is here. So write down 50, 30, 10, 9, and 1. Now, they made it nice and easy. They add up to 100. So we need to find the proportion, right? So 50 out of 100 would be 0.5. 30 out of 100, 0.3, so on. Now, get out your calculator. Here's what I need you to type in. 0.5, natural log. You should have an ln on your calculator somewhere. And 0.5. That will give you the first answer there. And then you'll need to do that for all of the rest of them. 0.3, ln, 0.3. What? Yep, it'll be negative. Yep. So the PI number, it's PI times ln of the PI. So the PI and PI before and after. So the first one you should get is negative 0.34. You're going to end up with negative numbers. They usually just take the absolute value of them. So then when you get all of these, you're going to add them all up. Remember, that's what the sum says. Sum, add them all up. Okay, so we end up getting negative 1.2 as our final answer when we add them all up. Okay, so this is how you calculate it. Again, you don't need to know how to calculate it for anything in here, but I wanted to show you how to do it. Okay. All right, so we have a phylogeny. I didn't even put this on your sheet because it's kind of review, but a phylogeny just shows the evolutionary relationships of whatever we're talking about. So in this case, all right, we would have the lancelet over here, the chipmunk over here. They show time. Okay, so the first one to evolve was the lancelet because we see it the lowest down here, and usually they're the furthest to the left as well. When we look at relationships between species, usually organisms that are like close together are more closely related than organisms that are far away. Okay, and then we have the traits down here. So they just show how organisms evolve. Again, it's just kind of a review. All right, what I need you to do on the next one, I would like you to figure out, I have the answers up from last class, so it's, I'm going to freeze the screen. What I need you to do is figure out where all of these different individual words go. So I'm going to unfreeze the screen for you guys. Okay, so look at your packet. This is review. You have these like definitions, and then I want you to see if you can put those words where they belong. Again, if you don't know it, totally fine. See what you can do. Okay, change in genetic composition of a population, what's that? Evolution. All individuals of the same species occupying the same area. Population. Section of DNA coding for a trait. Gene, one or two more slightly different forms of a gene. That's allele. Complete set of genes that make up an individual. Genotype, and then phenotype is down below. Okay? So here's what I want you to do. You can go ahead and put an X next to gene, allele, and genotype. You do not need to know those. So don't spend time memorizing the definition of those. I will not put any test questions on those. Okay? So one thing I wanted to go over is the fact that our genes, right, our environment, we're talking about AP environmental science here, our environment influences our genes a lot, okay, more than we think. In fact, we've been talking about air pollution, okay, air pollution, ozone depletion, that's affecting your genes. Whenever we get cancer, that's something in your environment, typically, that's causing that cancer to happen. So whether it be lung cancer from asbestos, whether it be skin cancer from those UVB rays hitting your skin, that's changing your genes. It's causing cancer. Genes can also be turned on and off based on your environment. So when we look at genes, they are often influenced by your environment. So one example here, water fleas raised in the absence of predators, so without predators, end up having a small head and a short tail. So that would be in this example over here on the right, small head, short tail. If they're raised with predators, they get this really long spiky tail and a big head, okay? So it just goes to show you that, you know, these fleas can be completely different depending on their environment that they're raised in. All right. Whoa. So 3 ways evolution occurs: artificial selection, natural selection, and random processes. Okay, in artificial selection, humans choose which individuals are going to end up reproducing together. They do this all the time with dogs. Anyone know anyone that has a golden doodle? Same thing, or a purebred dog, right? They take 2 Dalmatians, breed them together so they get a purebred Dalmatian. Or they take a golden retriever and a poodle and they combine them so you get a golden doodle. So individuals breed specific organisms. They've done this for years and years, thousands of years with crops, okay? This is what the ancestor of wheat and corn used to look like. Over time, it's evolved. Anyone ever seen those little baby corns in the stir fry? Okay, that's literally what the size of corn used to be, and now it's huge. Okay, if I'm a farmer and I'm going to get the biggest corn that I can, the biggest ears of corn, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to plant all my corn. I'm going to go out to my cornfield, and I'm going to pick out the ones with the biggest ears. Okay, I'm going to save the seeds from those plants. All the other ones I can eat. Right, I'm going to save the seeds from the biggest producing corn plants, and I'm going to plant them again. They're going to pollinate each other, okay? And then I'm going to keep doing that, and over time, I'm going to get slightly bigger and slightly bigger corn plants. However, I want you to underline this. This can have unintended consequences, okay? And those consequences can be herbicide resistance, antibiotic resistance, okay? So when we are breeding things, we don't realize what we're doing. A lot of times we're taking away genetic diversity and we're increasing the likelihood of resistance. Here's what I mean. If I'm a farmer, okay, this is herbicide resistant. So herbicide is used to kill herbs or weeds, okay, used to kill weeds. If I'm going to spray it on my farm over here, I get rid of all these weeds. It's great, okay? Well, one weed ends up surviving because it's got a mutant gene that allows it to survive this chemical. Okay, so it survives, it grows, it spreads its seeds, and the next summer, I get some more of these resistant ones, but I get the other ones coming back. I spray again. All the other ones end up dying. And over time, we're going to get all resistant varieties, right? Because they're going to keep reproducing. This is a big problem for a lot of farmers. And it's a big problem in the medical field as well with antibiotic resistance. So I want to show you a little clip on these farmers in Iowa that are having issues with herbicide resistance. So as we move on here, we have natural selection. Again, this should be reviewed from bio. So natural selection is where the environment determines which individuals survive and reproduce. Okay, the reason I wrote environment is because those that are best adapted to their environment end up surviving and reproducing. So fitness is an individual's ability to survive and reproduce. And a trait is an adaptation, or an adaptation is a trait that improves an individual's fitness. Sound good? All right, so last thing here, random processes. So we can have natural selection, artificial selection, and then random processes. This is when chance determines which individuals are going to survive and reproduce. So again, we're going to see how much you remember. See if you can put these words where they belong. If you're watching this, you get a sneak peek and can just write them down as you see them. All right, see if you can put these where they belong. All right, so the first one, change in DNA due to copying error, that is mutation. Individuals from one population move to another. That's gene flow. Change in genetic composition, that's genetic drift. Event reduces the population size, that would be bottleneck. Remember we talk about a bottleneck, bottle starting off big, getting smaller, right? So the population starts off big and an event reduces its size. And then last one's founder effect. So put an X next to these three. You do not need to know those definitions. But I want you to know mutation and gene flow. We will talk about gene flow in a little bit. All right, so the last thing that I want to talk about is why do changes in biodiversity matter? Okay, so this is the last slide. So small populations are more vulnerable to having evolution or their genes change. We call that microevolution, where their genes are changing. So less biodiversity means more inbreeding, so more breeding with each other. We're going to read an article on that tomorrow. Less resistance to change, greater risk of extinction. So once you're done with that, if you would get, if you have your multiple choice, we'll do 3 questions together if you get it out. All right, so number 4, let's look at number 4. It says, which measure of biodiversity takes into account the number of species present and the relative abundance of each species? So we have Shannon index, species richness, evenness, biodiversity index, or Hardy-Weinberg index. What measures the number of species and the abundance of each species, which is a full measure of biodiversity? Which one is it not? I'm only going to do it if somebody says something. Okay, it's not E. What's the only thing we've talked about a couple of those, right? We haven't talked about biodiversity index. It's not that one. Okay, so it's saying the number of species, that would be richness, and the abundance, that would be evenness. So what takes into account richness and evenness? All right, questions 5 to 7. So 5, it says, in the diagram, which pair of organisms shares the closest evolutionary relationship? So lancelet and lizard, chipmunk and lancelet, lancelet and trout, lizard and chipmunk, or lamprey and lizard. Which one? Which 2 are the closest? Lizard and chipmunk, so that's the correct answer there. 6, based on the diagram, which structure is the most primitive, meaning the most ancient? So which structure came first? The structures are in orange here, or notochord, right? Good. So A. And then which organism would be the most primitive, the most ancient? Which one came first? The lancelets. Okay.